The strange thing about modern life in the lucky country is that we've mistaken comfort for contentment. We are surrounded by abundance, yet we are drowning in a quiet, existential inertia. Most people are psychologically redlining before they have even boiled the kettle. We've mastered the art of the slow bleed burnout, where your potential is traded for a safe, predictable routine. You aren't just tired, you are suffering from a chronic case of cognitive load and spiritual debt. You're physically present, but your ambition is on life support. The digital parasite activates a blue light assault on your dopamine receptors. Before you've even processed the day, your morning rituals have been hijacked by the noise of the collective. By 6 a.m., you've surrendered your cognitive sovereignty. You are no longer the architect of your own evolution. You've become a reactive node in someone else's network. And somewhere underneath that digital debris, there is still a latent version of you, striving to architect a life of genuine substance, a quieter life, a disciplined existence. But your neurological defaults remain unchallenged, and every morning serves as a carbon copy of the last. You conceptualize the pivot. You simulate the focus, the rigor, the absolute reclamation of your cognitive sovereignty. But simulation is not execution. Then the temporal leakage takes hold. The day dissolves into the suburban hum. Again, there is a specific haunting loneliness that resides in the gap between your current output and your biological potential, while repeatedly watching yourself do less. You are bearing witness to the gradual entropy of your own potential, reflected in the glass of a lifestyle you merely inherited rather than designed. Not because you are stupid, not because you do not care. It is because your nervous system has been optimized for the path of least resistance, a biological betrayal of your highest aspirations. But because somewhere along the way, your brain learned that avoidance feels safer than effort. You have hard-coded a dopamine loop that prioritizes the immediate safety of the scroll over the necessary friction of growth. And now that pattern runs your life. You probably know the routine already. It is the ritual of the lucky country, where the comfort of the status quo becomes the silent killer of the exceptional. A rainy morning, gray light through the apartment window, coffee going cold beside the desk, the physical manifestation of another day where your intentions were hijacked by neurological stagnation. You have curated the entire kit. The ASICs are laced, the vision board is pinned, the Moleskine is open. You tell yourself today is the hard reset, the day you finally execute on that deep work project, or reclaim your physical vessel from the comfort trap of the lucky country. But the cognitive friction hits. To bypass the immediate discomfort of focus, your amygdala pulls the lever of least resistance. You tell yourself it's a pre-game ritual, just one hit of low-value digital novelty to settle your state before the real work begins. 60 seconds of dopamine mining mutates into a 2-hour sinkhole. The Melbourne sun shifts across your desk, and suddenly, your mental environment is polluted. The day feels contaminated, no longer pristine enough for your perfectionist ego to operate. The window of peak performance has slammed shut. To alleviate the crushing guilt of another wasted afternoon, your psyche negotiates a truce. It's a neurological bypass, a dopamine-fueled delusion designed to stop the bleeding. The clean slate fallacy. You whisper to your reflection that tomorrow, the stars will align and your discipline will be infinite. And the most dangerous part? You actually believe the lie because it's easier than facing the void of your own inaction. The blue light of your phone has finally faded, leaving only the stark silence of the suburbs. In this cognitive vacuum, the veneer of having a fair go drops. You are staring at the ceiling, and for the first time today, the compounding interest of your hesitation is unignorable. Shadows crawl across the cornices like a countdown. This is the pre-sleep audit. The cortisol spikes because you know you traded your legacy for a low-resolution scrolling loop. Then, the ego initiates a lethal negotiation, the fresh start mirage. Jaw tight, eyelids heavy with the weight of unspent energy. You whisper the great Australian lie. Tomorrow, the friction will be gone. Tomorrow, I will be the version of me that actually executes. But the dawn over the Pacific doesn't deliver a new software update for your psyche. You wake up with the same synaptic pathways, the same neurological resistance, the same she'll be right attitude that has become your invisible prison. Let's strip back the mythology. You aren't lazy. You are suffering from a high-functioning state of existential stasis, a misalignment of your biological hardware with your high-level aspirations. Your current environment is a sedative. Our ancestral survival drive was never calibrated for surplus. Your biology is hardwired for homeostatic inertia to conserve energy and avoid the hunt unless starvation is imminent. The brain is a master of bioenergetic protection, not self-actualization. Enter the lucky country. Here, the fair go has morphed into a dangerous standard of baseline luxury. We have commoditized ease. From the sun-drenched brunch spots in Fitzroy to the instant gratification of delivery apps, comfort is no longer a reward. It is our default state. But it is the digital anesthesia that truly severs the link to your potential. Your phone is a dopamine delivery system designed to curate an environment of zero friction. We use scrolling to bypass the cognitive friction necessary for growth. You are not relaxing. You are being sedated by the algorithm. This is more than a bad habit. It is neuroplastic atrophy. By choosing the path of least resistance every single hour, you are re-engineering your nervous system to view effort as a physiological threat. You are conditioning yourself for a life of permanent existential stasis. The most insidious part? This slow decay does not feel like a tragedy. It feels like a warm bath. It is the she'll be right attitude weaponized against your own future. It is a velvet trap of temporary relief that quietly suffocates the person you were meant to become. That is why it becomes addictive. Not the apps themselves, the cognitive escape. You are buffering against the friction of your own untapped potential. Because every time you avoid a high-stakes task, your limbic system rewards you for surviving the perceived threat. You have Pavlovian trained your brain to equate stagnation with safety. Eventually, you develop a binary existence. This is ontological bifurcation. You begin living in two separate realities, the idealized version of your legacy and the mediocre reality of your lived experience. In your internal narrative, you are the high performer, resolute, disciplined, a titan of the lucky country who has actually earned the luck. But your neurometrics and your actual calendar tell a different story. And that gap, that is the existential deficit. That is where the life you are postponing goes to die. This ontological bifurcation, the widening chasm between your latent greatness and your repetitive mediocrity begins to metastasize. It quietly erodes your cognitive sovereignty until you no longer realize you're settling for a shadow version of your life. We mislabel this paralysis as high standards. But for the intelligent Australian, perfectionism is the ultimate psychological bypass. It is a sophisticated defense mechanism designed to avoid the gritty friction of being seen as a novice. You indulge in hyper-vivid visualization, crafting a future so immaculate that the messiness of actual execution feels like a downgrade. You've curated a mental masterpiece, yet your daily behavior remains stuck in a loop of low-resolution habits. So you wait. You wait for the optimal effective state, that mythical surge of inspiration, or the perfect plan. You're trading your finite time for the comfort of a theoretical success that never requires you to actually sweat. But let's be brutal. Perfectionism is rarely about excellence. In the vast majority of cases, it is simply cowardice wearing a tailored suit. It is fear wearing expensive clothing, masquerading as a virtue while it murders your potential. Because if you never truly cross that threshold, you never have to discover your limits. You are choosing the safety of neural hedging over the risk of actualized growth. Most Australians stay shackled to their potential because it functions as an ego safety net. Potential is a comforting hallucination. Reality is a cold, exposing shower. Potential allows you to curate a mental highlight reel of greatness without ever incurring the cost of failure. But reality demands the friction of being. It asks for your sweat, not your dreams. It requires tactical humiliation, the clumsy first draft, the labored, uncoordinated gym set at dawn. This is the unglamorous neuroadaptive grit that no one posts on a curated feed. This is where our modern lucky country narrative fails us. We obsess over the dopamine hit of motivation, but we ignore affective endurance, the capacity to sit in the fire of your own inadequacy. Discipline isn't some high-octane surge of willpower. It is actually a form of cognitive friction management. It is the raw ability to hold space for your own inadequacy without flinching or retreating into a screen. We call this affective endurance. It is the solitary repetition at a local gym before the sun hits Bondi. It is the deep, quiet labor that offers zero social currency and zero immediate dopamine. Let us be real, the first phase of tactical humiliation is internal. It does not feel like a cinematic montage. It feels like a dull, grating headache. It feels like being the smallest person in the room. Your limbic resistance will peak instantly. Your brain will try to convince you that you are fatigued or famished or suddenly in need of a break for your mental health. It is a biological lie. Suddenly, you will remember a trivial email or a household chore that feels life-altering. These are not priorities. They are cognitive escape hatches designed to protect your ego from the work. Stay in the chair. And that resistance can feel deeply personal, a moral failing, even until you realize it is purely mechanical. Your limbic resistance isn't a personality trait, it is a predictable human biological safety brake. The individuals who eventually change their trajectory across the lucky country aren't always the most motivated. Usually, they have just shut down their cognitive escape hatches. They stop negotiating with their lizard brain and start executing. They engineer an environment for effective endurance. They reduce friction. They simplify. Phone in another room. Desk cleared at twilight. Fixed waking window. Same training rhythm. They outsource willpower to their architecture. Small routines repeated in the quiet of a Bondi dawn until the identity begins to shift. Because identity doesn't pivot on a whim, it drifts through consistent neural consolidation. Long before your life transforms externally, your nervous system adapts internally. The friction fades. The discomfort becomes less dramatic. You are finally inhabiting the life you stopped postponing. The limbic resistance begins to soften. Your neural circuitry finally recognizes the pattern. We survived this yesterday. Then again, and again. You are no longer fighting your physiology. You are re-engineering it through sheer repetition, until the cognitive load shifts and effort stops being flagged as an existential threat. But here is the cold reality check most of the lucky country ignores while they drift through a comfortable fog. Passive consumption of self-optimization frameworks is its own form of dopaminergic loop. You are watching videos on discipline to avoid the friction of actually practicing it. You are researching productivity as a sophisticated escape hatch to avoid producing anything of value. Radical transformation is not about an overnight overhaul of your identity. It is about reducing the latency between thought and action. Perhaps the goal is simpler than becoming a titan of industry overnight. Wake up tomorrow and remain present long enough to execute one high-friction task before you reach for an escape. Just keep showing up for your own life, even when there is no audience to validate your grit. Fade to black,